Emma Coronel's marriage with El Chapo was much nastier than most people ever realized.
And speaking out, the wife of notorious Mexican drug lord El Chapo is breaking.
El Chapo's wife lived a life of luxury during...
Well, Mexican drug kingpin El Chapo's wife has been released from prison.
From the outside, it looked like something out of a telenovela. A young beauty queen married to one of the most powerful and feared men on earth, sitting in courtrooms dressed in designer clothes while federal prosecutors laid out the brutal economics of a criminal empire that had flooded the United States with cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana for decades. She looked composed. She looked glamorous. She looked like someone watching someone else's drama from a very expensive seat. But what was actually happening behind that image was something the public would not fully understand until federal prosecutors in Washington, D.C. laid out the criminal case against her. The marriage was not simply a private relationship. It was an arrangement that put Emma directly inside one of the world's most powerful drug trafficking organizations, and it eventually made her a federal criminal defendant in her own right. The story becomes much darker once you look past the fashion and the courtroom theatrics. Because this marriage began when Emma was a teenager, and it ended with one of them free and one of them never coming home. But before we get into how it ended, I need you to first understand how it began. 'Cause the origin of this relationship tells you everything about the power dynamic that shaped everything that followed. Emma Modesta Coronel Aispuro was born on July 2, 1989, near San Francisco, California, while her mother was visiting relatives in the United States. That birth in America gave her U.S. citizenship, a fact that would become critically important decades later when federal prosecutors pursued her through the American court system. She did not grow up in California. She grew up in La Angostura, a remote ranch community in Canelas, in the Mexican state of Durango, deep inside the region known as the Golden Triangle. This is not incidental geography. The Golden Triangle, where the states of Sinaloa, Durango, and Chihuahua converge, is historically the most significant illicit crop production zone in Mexico, and the birthplace of several of the most powerful trafficking networks in North American criminal history. Emma was not born into ordinary rural poverty. She was born into a family with ties to the very world that El Chapo had spent decades building. Her father, Emma Coronel Barreras, was a cattle rancher in Canelas, with documented ties to the Sinaloa cartel. Her uncle, Edgar Coronel Aispuro, also had alleged cartel connections. The family environment Emma grew up in was one where the normal boundaries between legitimate commerce and criminal organization were blurred in ways that she would have understood from an early age. She participated in local beauty pageants as a teenager and briefly studied journalism at the University of Sinaloa before her life took a direction that no journalism curriculum could have prepared her for. Now here's where it gets interesting. The man Emma would eventually marry was already, by 2006, one of the most wanted human beings on the planet. Joaquin Archibaldo Guzman Loera had been building the Sinaloa cartel into a global trafficking empire for decades. By the mid-2000s, Forbes magazine was listing him as one of the most powerful people in the world. He had escaped from a Mexican federal prison in 2001 inside a laundry cart, evaded recapture for years while continuing to run his organization, and was the subject of massive law enforcement attention from both Mexican and American authorities. He was not simply a successful criminal. He was a symbol of organized crime's ability to corrupt institutions, evade governments, and accumulate power that rivaled sovereign states. His network reportedly generated billions of dollars annually. His organization had corrupted police forces, military units, politicians, and judges at every level of Mexican government. When El Chapo wanted something done in the corridors of power, he generally found ways to make it happen. The Sinaloa cartel, under El Chapo's leadership, had become the dominant drug trafficking organization in the Western Hemisphere. Its reach extended through Mexico, across the U.S. border, and into American cities from Los Angeles to Chicago to New York, through distribution networks supplying cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana. The organization managed corruption payments, violence, logistics, and the sophisticated financial infrastructure needed to move and clean billions of dollars. By the time Emma Coronel walked into El Chapo's world, she was walking into something that dwarfed any individual relationship in its scope and complexity. When El Chapo reportedly first encountered Emma Coronel at a ranch dance in Canales, Durango in 2006, she was approximately 17 years old. He was approximately 49. That gap of more than 3 decades is not simply a statistic. It represents an enormous asymmetry in life experience, in power, in access to resources, and in the ability to shape circumstances around another person. Emma was a teenager, living in a remote rural community with family ties to his criminal world. El Chapo was a fugitive drug lord controlling a multinational trafficking organization worth billions of dollars annually. He had armed associates, corrupted officials, vast wealth, and the ability to bend the immediate environment to his will. She had a beauty pageant background and a family who knew who he was. According to accounts reported in the years that followed, El Chapo used his influence around the Coffee and Guava Festival in Canales to ensure Emma won the local beauty contest. Some accounts describe him deploying hundreds of armed cartel associates to the town of Canales during Three Kings Day in 2007 to ensure the event went the way he wanted and that Emma emerged with the crown. The exact nature and degree of that influence varies depending on the source, and this specific detail has been reported through accounts and subsequent journalism rather than established through direct court findings. But the pattern it suggests is consistent with what federal prosecutors would later describe about El Chapo's relationship with his immediate environment. He could shape the world around him. And in a remote Durango town where his influence was substantial, a beauty contest was not beyond that reach. Her father, Emma Coronel Barreras, was a cattle rancher in Canales, with documented ties to the Sinaloa cartel. Her brothers had their own alleged roles in cartel operations, described in reporting as participating in smuggling and transportation activities. The family environment Emma grew up in was one where the normal boundaries between legitimate commerce and criminal organization were blurred, and where the men around her had practical involvement in the same world El Chapo commanded. The marriage connected 2 family networks already operating within the same criminal ecosystem. On July 2, 2007, Emma's 18th birthday, she and El Chapo were married. The symbolism of that date is almost impossible to miss. The marriage happened on the exact day she turned legally adult. Whether that timing was deliberate or coincidental, it meant that Emma's transition into the formal role of El Chapo's wife coincided with the moment of her legal majority. She had met a fugitive cartel boss as a teenager and became his wife the morning she turned 18. The marriage did not occur in a vacuum. It occurred inside a family network where criminal activity was not an exception, but a structural reality. El Chapo already had children and prior relationships. His organization was a functioning criminal enterprise, managing drug shipments, managing corruption payments, managing violence, and managing the day-to-day logistics of one of the most sophisticated drug trafficking operations in history. Emma entered that world formally and completely on her 18th birthday. The psychological dimension of that beginning deserves serious attention. This is not something you can simply dismiss as a personal choice made between 2 equal adults. Emma's introduction to this man occurred when she was a child by virtually any meaningful standard. By the time she was old enough to formally commit to a legal relationship, the connection was already established. The power imbalance, between a teenager in rural Durango and a man who commanded loyalty through money, violence, and decades of accumulated criminal authority was profound. That does not erase the choices Emma made as an adult. Her own guilty plea made clear that she made deliberate decisions that had criminal consequences, but the circumstances of how the relationship began matter when you try to understand what followed. For years, Emma's public image was something quite different from the reality prosecutors later described. During El Chapo's legal battles, she became internationally recognizable for her fashion sense, her calm courtroom demeanor, her striking appearance, and the bizarre celebrity attention that surrounded the trial of one of history's most notorious drug lords. News organizations photographed her outside the courthouse. Fashion publications discussed her clothing. Social media accounts tracked her outfits. The courtroom had become, in part, a spectacle, and Emma was one of its most photographed participants. But inside that federal courthouse in Brooklyn, the evidence being presented told a very different story than the glamour magazines. Witnesses described drug shipments moving cocaine by the ton. They described violence used to maintain discipline and territory. They described corruption payments to officials across multiple countries. They described the scale of a criminal enterprise that had generated billions of dollars in revenue while flooding American cities with drugs that destroyed lives. Emma attended that trial as a spouse. Federal prosecutors later presented her as someone who had participated in that enterprise in her own right. Here is what the government eventually alleged about Emma's role. She was not simply a passive spouse who happened to be married to a criminal. According to prosecutors, she played a material role in maintaining communications and facilitating activities on behalf of the cartel. Her status as El Chapo's wife gave her access that ordinary intermediaries could not have had. She could visit him. She could receive messages from him and relay them to people outside. She could use the natural trust associated with a spousal relationship to maintain connections between a man in custody and the organization he was supposed to be directing. When El Chapo was in Mexican custody, spousal visits created access. Access created communication opportunities. Communication opportunities could be used to relay information about the organization. You see, this is not simply about personal loyalty. This is about the structural utility of a relationship inside a criminal organization where information is currency and the ability to reach the top is enormously valuable. Prosecutors also presented Emma as having connections to Los Chapitos, the faction built around El Chapo's sons, Joaquin Guzmán and Ovidio Guzmán, and to the broader criminal family network. The prosecution presented evidence connecting her to communications and activities involving family members and cartel associates. She was alleged to have participated in narcotics distribution and money laundering activities, making her not simply the wife of a criminal, but a participant in criminal activity herself. And then came July 2015. El Chapo escaped from the Altiplano maximum security prison in Mexico through a tunnel that stretched more than a mile beneath the prison floor. The escape was extraordinary in its planning and execution. Workers had spent months digging. The tunnel was equipped with lighting, ventilation, and a modified motorcycle on rails to help move through it. El Chapo apparently stepped into the shower area of his cell, dropped through a hole in the floor, and disappeared. It remains one of the most audacious prison escapes in history. Federal prosecutors later presented evidence that Emma was involved in elements of planning and financing the escape. According to the government's case about Emma's role, before July 2015, a person could look at her situation and argue, with some plausibility, that she was a wife living beside a criminal, not a partner in his crimes. That argument became much harder to sustain once prosecutors had evidence connecting her to the planning of an escape that required money, coordination, external logistics, and the involvement of people connected to the Sinaloa cartel's operational network. El Chapo did not remain free for long. He was recaptured by Mexican authorities in January 2016, 6 months after the escape. The spectacle of his capture, complete with the famous meeting with actor Sean Penn and actress Kate Del Castillo that had inadvertently helped lead authorities to his location, became its own global media event. Then came the legal process that would define the rest of his life. El Chapo was extradited to the United States in January 2017. His trial in the Eastern District of New York began in November 2018 and ran for months, featuring testimony from former cartel associates, government operatives, and others who described in detail the workings of the Sinaloa cartel. The government presented evidence of corruption reaching the highest levels of Mexican government, including, according to testimony, payments to former Mexican presidents. Witnesses described drug shipments measured in tons, moving through submarines, aircraft, border tunnels, and commercial containers. They described violence used to maintain discipline, including the killing of rivals and punishment of disloyal members. They described a criminal operation that had penetrated law enforcement at virtually every level through money and threat. The scale of what prosecutors described during those months of testimony was almost incomprehensible. The Sinaloa cartel, under El Chapo's leadership, had moved hundreds of tons of cocaine into the United States. It had corrupted institutions across multiple countries. It had used violence and the threat of violence to maintain discipline throughout its networks. The human cost of the drugs it distributed, the addiction, the overdoses, the violence associated with drug markets in American cities, was impossible to fully quantify, but enormous in every dimension. Throughout the trial, Emma was a fixture in the courtroom galleries. Photographers captured her outside the building. Reporters described her appearance in detail. Fashion publications took note of her clothing choices. The disconnect between the fashion coverage and the criminal evidence was striking and deeply uncomfortable. In November 2018, one side of the story was beautiful clothes and composed expressions in the gallery. The other side was detailed testimony about cocaine shipments, murder orders, and systemic corruption that had damaged 2 countries for decades. Emma attended her husband's trial as a symbol of personal loyalty. She would not attend it as a casual observer much longer. Federal investigators were building a separate case with her name on it. In July 2019, he was sentenced to life in federal prison plus 30 years, with no possibility of early release, no realistic avenue for appeal that could change that outcome, no path back to the outside world. He was sent to the Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado, ADX Florence, which houses the most dangerous and high-profile federal prisoners in the United States under conditions of extraordinary restriction. His world became one of near total isolation. Emma's world was about to become much more complicated. El Chapo's conviction did not end the federal government's interest in people around him. Investigations into cartel-connected figures continued. Emma's earlier activities, her alleged role in communications, her alleged role in financial matters, her alleged role in the 2015 escape, had been part of the evidentiary record for years. Federal investigators and prosecutors had the time, the resources, and the evidence to build a case against her separately from her husband's. The timing of Emma's arrest carries its own significance. February 22, 2021, nearly 2 years after El Chapo's conviction, nearly 2 years after he had been sent to ADX Florence, nearly 2 years during which the government had continued its investigation into the people around him. She had continued attending public events. She had continued appearing on social media. she had not quietly disappeared from public view. She was still visible, and on the day she entered the United States at Dulles International Airport in Virginia, federal agents were there to meet her. On February 22, 2021, Emma Coronel Aispuro was arrested at Dulles International Airport. She was charged with conspiracy to distribute narcotics internationally, specifically heroin, cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine, money laundering, and conducting transactions with a foreign narcotics trafficker under the Foreign Narcotics Kingpin Designation Act. The woman who had attended her husband's trial as a spouse was now a federal defendant with her own docket number and her own set of criminal allegations to answer. The charges carried the potential for a substantial prison term. The specific maximum potential sentences under each count were significant, and a conviction at trial on all charges could have resulted in a life sentence, the same outcome her husband had received. Emma faced a genuine legal reckoning that her husband's world had eventually made inevitable. The public, which had followed her as a fashion figure during El Chapo's proceedings, was now looking at her in an entirely different context. She was not a courtroom spectator who had dressed well and sat quietly beside her incarcerated husband. She was a defendant. The decision she faced was the same one that federal defendants in serious narcotics cases always face: fight the charges and risk a potentially much longer sentence, or accept responsibility through a plea agreement and cooperate with investigators in exchange for consideration at sentencing. Emma chose the latter path. On June 10, 2021, she formally admitted in federal court to conspiring to distribute heroin, cocaine, marijuana, and methamphetamine internationally, to engaging in a money laundering conspiracy, and to conducting financial transactions with a designated foreign narcotics trafficker. She admitted, formally and under oath, to criminal conduct connected to the empire her husband had built and that she had participated in maintaining. The sentencing came on November 30, 2021. Emma Coronel Aispuro was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, 36 months. She was also ordered to forfeit approximately $1.5 million in proceeds from her criminal conduct. 3 years. Let that sit for a moment. Her husband received life plus 30 years, with no realistic prospect of ever being free again. She received 3 years. The contrast is not accidental. Federal sentencing is influenced. Emma had pleaded guilty. She had admitted her role. She had cooperated with Documented is that her cooperation was a factor in the government's approach to her case. The woman who had once helped keep El Chapo's world connected to the outside had now provided information to the people who had imprisoned him. Emma spent her time in federal custody at FMC Carswell, a federal medical center in Texas. In May 2023, she was transferred from the facility to community confinement in California, a halfway house arrangement that typically precedes full release. In September 2023, she was fully released from federal custody. She was placed on 4 years of supervised release, meaning she remained under the monitoring of the federal system, but was living as a free person. Her life after prison has been one of the most striking reinvention stories connected to El Chapo's world. Emma did not disappear into quiet anonymity after her release. She did the opposite. Within the first year following her release, she launched a shapewear line called 347, a name that is a direct reference to her prison sentence, a kind of reclamation of the number that defined the most difficult period of her adult life. The decision to name a fashion brand after the length of her federal imprisonment is itself a statement, though what exactly it is meant to say is something only Emma fully knows. Is it a way of owning the narrative? Is it an acknowledgement that the sentence is now part of her public identity? Is it simply marketing cleverness? Probably some combination of all three. She participated in Milan Fashion Week in September 2024 as a model for LA-based designer April Black Diamond, walking the runway at Palazzo Serbelloni, the historic palazzo that had served as Napoleon's Italian residence during his occupation of Milan. The promotional campaign for the show was ambitious by any standard. A billboard ran in Times Square in New York City before the event. Designer April Black Diamond publicly explained her choice by saying that in a world where fashion often celebrates outer beauty, she was committed to showcasing a deeper, more powerful narrative. Whatever the designer's intention, the result was an international news story. El Chapo's wife was walking a runway in Napoleon's palace. The image was so surreal that it generated coverage from outlets that would not ordinarily report on fashion at all. She starred in her own documentary and announced involvement in the production of a narco series featuring Rafael Amaya. She appeared at events and celebrations, her 2024 birthday party at Hacienda El Patern in Carolina, Puerto Rico, where Tito El Bambino performed, was documented on social media. Her 2025 birthday was marked with images at sea, bikinis, and a jet ski. Her 37th birthday on July 2, 2026, was more subdued. She shared congratulatory messages from family and friends, including a post from her sister Claudia, who shared a photo of Emma in a snowy landscape in a fur coat and sunglasses with the caption that distance separates their paths, but never their love. Not incidental. They are part of the documented record of what she has been doing since her release. What she has been doing is building a public life that is visually, professionally, and culturally far removed from a federal prison cell in Texas and from the world of the Sinaloa cartel. But here is the disturbing paradox running through all of it. The same criminal notoriety Emma is ostensibly trying to move beyond is also the primary reason anyone is watching her move beyond it. Meanwhile, El Chapo remained in a cell at Adex Florence. The contrast between their two lives after the conviction is almost impossible to fully absorb. El Chapo's world has become the interior of a federal supermax prison in Colorado, designed specifically to prevent any meaningful communication or connection with the outside. Adex Florence is the most restrictive federal prison in the United States. Hours a day in single occupancy cells. Movement within the facility is severely restricted. Human contact is minimal by design. Communications with the outside world, phone calls, mail, visits, are monitored, restricted, and in some cases nearly eliminated entirely. According to reporting on El Chapo's conditions at the facility, he has been largely cut off from meaningful communication with Emma and with the outside world generally. The facility exists specifically to house people whose influence and capabilities are considered so dangerous that ordinary maximum security prisons are deemed insufficient. El Chapo is serving life, plus 30 years at that facility. His world has been reduced in scope from controlling a multinational criminal empire worth billions of dollars annually to the four walls of a cell in the Colorado mountains. The organization he built, the Sinaloa cartel, has continued in fragmentary form under other leadership, particularly through Los Chapitos, his sons who built their own power structures within the organization. But he has no realistic ability to direct any of it. His operational authority ended when he entered Adex Florence. The criminal empire that once generated billions of dollars continues to exist, but it does so without him, and in meaningful ways, without regard for him. Emma's world, by contrast, is one of relative freedom, professional reinvention, and public attention. She is serving supervised release, which means federal monitoring remains part of her reality. But she can travel within the permitted bounds of her release conditions. She can build a business. She can walk a runway in Milan. She can give interviews. She can raise the twin daughters she shares with El Chapo, daughters whose identities and locations she has generally kept private. She can make choices about what her life looks like going forward. Those choices, however constrained by legal supervision, represent a form of freedom that El Chapo will almost certainly never experience again. The question that runs through this entire story is how much of her involvement in El Chapo's criminal world was a deliberate choice, and how much was the product of circumstances she was embedded in before she was old enough to fully understand what they meant. She entered a relationship with El Chapo as a teenager, where his influence was substantial and her family's own connections to his world were real. She became his wife on the morning of her 18th birthday. She spent her adult life inside a family network that was also a criminal organization, with no independent professional identity before becoming El Chapo's wife. Her entire adult identity developed inside the world he controlled. But she also made choices. Federal prosecutors established that, and Emma herself confirmed it by pleading guilty. She admitted to drug trafficking conspiracy. She admitted to money laundering. She admitted to conducting financial transactions with a designated narcotics trafficker. Those admissions reflect deliberate conduct she acknowledged in federal court. The uncomfortable answer is that both things can be true simultaneously, and that our legal and moral frameworks are not always well designed to handle that complexity cleanly. She was an extraordinarily young person, embedded in a world of overwhelming criminal power, and she made choices within that world that created her own criminal liability. The law does not require a clean separation between victim and participant. Emma's own guilty plea placed her clearly in the participant category. History should hold both the accountability and the context in view simultaneously. Then there is the question of what loyalty meant inside this specific world. Loyalty inside a cartel family is not the same as loyalty between ordinary friends or spouses. It is deeply intertwined with self-preservation. In an environment where disloyalty can be punished with extreme violence, the decision to remain loyal is also a decision to remain safe. The decision to eventually cooperate with federal authorities represents not just a legal strategy, but a dramatic rupture, both from the relationship with El Chapo specifically and from the broader world of the Sinaloa cartel's family networks. Whatever Emma said to federal investigators, whatever information she provided, the act of providing it was itself a statement about where her loyalties ultimately resided when the choice was placed in front of her. The loyalty that tied Emma to El Chapo's world was not simple. Loyalty inside a cartel family operates at multiple levels simultaneously. It is personal. She knew him. She had children with him. She had built her adult life around their relationship. It is institutional. The family was part of the organization, and the organization was part of the family. And it is enforced in a world where demonstrating disloyalty can have severe consequences. The decision to cooperate with federal authorities represents not just a legal strategy, but a dramatic personal rupture with everything that had defined her identity for years. When Emma sat in a federal courtroom and pleaded guilty, she was not simply managing her legal exposure. She was breaking with the world she had entered as a teenager. If you take the time and do your homework, you can find out that the Sinaloa cartel's operations did not collapse when El Chapo was imprisoned. Los Chapitos, his sons, built their own power within the organization and continued operations on a massive scale. Ovidio Guzmán was eventually extradited to the United States in 2023. The cartel itself continued fragmenting and evolving. Emma's cooperation may have contributed to investigations that continued long after her sentencing, though the exact scope of what she provided remains largely outside the public record. What is clear is that the marriage between Emma Coronel Aispuro and Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was never simply a private romantic arrangement between two individuals. It was a relationship embedded in the center of a criminal empire that had shaped Mexican and American society in profound and damaging ways. The drugs the Sinaloa cartel moved through its networks contributed to addiction, violence, and death on both sides of the border. The corruption it generated weakened institutions at every level. The violence it employed to maintain discipline and territory cost the lives of people who were never part of any cartel calculation. Emma's fashion choices during her husband's trial became media content. The people whose families were destroyed by cartel drugs did not receive the same coverage. That contrast is perhaps the most disturbing element of the entire story. Now let us walk through the full timeline one more time, because the sequence matters to understanding how this story becomes what it is. Emma was born in 1989 in California to a family with cartel connections. She grew up on a ranch in the Golden Triangle in Durango. She participated in local beauty pageants. She met El Chapo in 2006 at a ranch dance in Canelas when she was approximately 17. According to multiple accounts, his influence affected the outcome of a local beauty contest connected to a regional festival. On July 2, 2007, her 18th birthday, she married him. For years, she lived inside the family world that surrounded him. She maintained communications and connections that prosecutors later characterized as active participation in cartel operations. In July 2015, El Chapo escaped from Altiplano prison through a tunnel that prosecutors alleged she helped finance and coordinate. He was recaptured in January 2016. He was extradited to the United States in January 2017. His trial ran from November 2018 through February 2019. He was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life plus 30 years in July 2019. He was sent to Addix, Florence in Colorado. On February 22, 2021, Emma was arrested at Dulles Airport. She was charged with conspiracy to distribute narcotics, money laundering, and related offenses. On June 10, 2021, she pleaded guilty. On November 30, 2021, she was sentenced to 36 months in federal prison and ordered to forfeit approximately $1.5 million. She was transferred to community confinement in California in May 2023. She was released from federal custody in September 2023, beginning 4 years of supervised release. She launched the 347 shapewear brand. She walked the Milan Fashion Week runway in September 2024. She starred in her own documentary. She announced a Narco series production. She turned 37 on July 2, 2026, still under supervised release, but living freely. He remained in a cell at Addix, Florence, with no realistic path to ever leaving it. The marriage did not end with a formal divorce announcement. It ended with the physical and practical reality of two people living in permanently different conditions. One of them is essentially stationary inside a federal supermax, with every possible restriction placed on his ability to connect with the outside world. The other is building a business, one she had occupied for nearly 2 decades. Here is something no one actually talks about clearly in all the coverage of Emma as a fashion figure and celebrity. The same notoriety that drives the public fascination with her current life is entirely derived from the criminal history she is supposedly moving beyond. People attend her runway shows, partly because she is El Chapo's wife. People watch her documentary, partly because of his name. The shapewear brand gets media coverage it otherwise would not receive because of the criminal empire that defined her past. She cannot fully escape the world she came from, because the world she came from is the primary reason anyone is paying attention. That paradox sits at the center of the story. Emma Coronel is trying to build an identity separate from El Chapo, but the interest in Emma Coronel as a public figure is almost entirely dependent on her connection to El Chapo. The marriage was much nastier than it looked, because it was never simply a marriage. It was an entry point into one of the world's most powerful criminal organizations. It provided Emma with wealth, influence, and access that she would not otherwise have had. It also placed her inside a world of violence, criminal liability, federal investigation, and eventual imprisonment. And it permanently linked her name, in the public imagination, in court records, in journalism archives, in academic analyses of the Sinaloa cartel, to a man who will spend the rest of his life in one of the most restrictive prison facilities in the United States. The broader lesson the story demonstrates is one that applies beyond this specific case. When a person's marriage is also their membership in a criminal organization, the personal and the institutional become impossible to separate. A spouse can be a messenger. A family dinner can be an operational meeting. The same trust that makes a marriage work can make criminal communications possible. And when law enforcement finally intervenes, the same family relationships that created access, trust, and operational utility become evidence. Emma's cooperation with federal prosecutors was, in a sense, the final moment when the personal and the institutional were separated. She told the government what she knew. She received a dramatically shorter sentence than her husband, and she walked out of federal custody into a world that is rebuilding itself around an identity that is separate from his, even if it cannot yet fully escape the shadow of his name. The question that defines the legacy of this marriage: how much of Emma Coronel's life was built by her marriage to El Chapo, and how much of her life has she managed to build in the years since leaving that world, does not have a simple answer yet. She is still in her 30s. She is still under supervised release. Her story is still being written. But the contrast with El Chapo's story could not be more stark. His story ended in a cell in Colorado. Hers is still unfolding, on runways and in documentary films and in the choices she makes every day about who she wants to become. Emma Coronel did not simply marry El Chapo. She entered an entire world built around power, fear, money, secrecy, and loyalty. For years, she appeared to stand quietly beside the man at the center of it all. But prosecutors later argued that she was helping keep parts of that world moving. The same loyalty that had once connected her to El Chapo could no longer protect her. She pleaded guilty, served her sentence, and walked back into a world he will never see again. Maybe that's what makes this marriage so disturbing. It didn't end with a breakup. It ended with two people living on completely different sides of freedom.